healthy organizations, those are some of the issues we deal with. And one of the areas that we really work on is building innovation into organizations. And in Adizes, really, we are structuralists, right? Which means we focus pretty heavily on how to build the right kind of structure so that you can have an innovative, healthy and innovative organization, right? And then, so innovation, right? What about innovation? Why is it so important? It's an easy question, so somebody should be able to answer it. What's important about it? There's always change, right? So if you don't innovate, what happens? You get passed by because everybody else is innovating, right? The market's changing, everything's changing. And so really for long-term sustainability, we need innovation, right? Innovation, we think of innovation, what do we think of? If you're looking for innovation in your company, what is it you're looking for? Higher effectiveness, right? But a lot of times we think of a new product, right? Something nobody else has had, okay? Something that's kind of breakthrough, something that's going to help us take over the market, right? That's what we think about in innovation. In Adizes, we think about it a little bit differently. Innovation is anything that you do different, right? In a process, in a product, in an approach to customers, right? It's when you come up with a new way of doing something. It's just something small, but it's an innovation. And it doesn't have to be something like inventing the telephone. Right? So an innovation really is a new method, a new idea that we're going to put into practice, a new product, something like that. So anything really that is new that we're doing differently. And the reason that's important, again, is because everything's constantly changing. And if you don't come up with a new way of doing it, somebody else is going to. And your way of doing it is going to be outdated pretty quickly. Right? So we're constantly having to learn, right? Innovation is about learning, and learning new ways of doing things. And so how do we build that into organizations is really what we want to talk about today, okay? And then this builds sustainability. If you can continuously innovate, hi, come in, welcome, right? If you can continuously innovate and find new ways of doing things that satisfies the market, right? You build in sustainability. And so that's really what we're looking for. And of course, if you think about organizations, one of the most sustainable, I don't know how innovative it is, but maybe it's not built on continuous change, but what's it built on? The church. Where does its sustainability come from? Okay, strong set of values, beliefs, principles, right? That actually remain not really changing. Okay. But they allow change to happen within society, but we still follow those same principles. Okay? So that's another aspect of it, is sure we have to change all the time, but some things we want to keep, right, that we don't want to change. Right? And some values, principles, things like that, certain beliefs, ways of doing things, those things we might not want to change. Okay? But it's sustainability. Now this is the oldest company in the world, founded in 578 in Japan, a building company, construction company. Right? 40 generations that it's into now. Okay? And it's built on certain principles that they feel is what has kept this company going, right? Flexibility in selecting leaders. So it didn't always go to the first son, the company, when there was a transition, right, from succession planning. It didn't always go to the first son. Sometimes it went to a son-in-law, right? Somebody that wasn't even a direct son of the founder or the current owner of the company, leader of the company. But the son-in-law always took the family name. And so the name stayed the same. Right? So some things they don't change. Right? In selecting leaders, they're looking for flexibility in the person. Right? Their ability to change and adapt with change. Right? And then talent for the job. So this company's been around for a long time. Unfortunately, in 2007, it ran into hard times and was bought by somebody. So it doesn't exist in the same form since 2007. And now the oldest company is another Japanese company, right, which is a hotel, 1,300 years old. Okay? In Japan, they also have the oldest living people in the world, right? Some of the oldest population. Okay? So, and a lot of this is built on these values. So values is an important part of it, keeping those values strong and living by them and so on. What do we do with values today in companies? Where do we see them? On the wall, on the website, right? And do they really drive behavior in companies? I mean, some do, but are the ones that, you know, we put on paper and put on, you know, we respect teamwork. We want teamwork, we have respect for individuals, and yet the people that get promoted are the highest performers who maybe aren't the best team workers, right? Difficult employees. Okay. So, what we're looking for in Adizes, when we're building companies, when we're working with companies, is to build a balance between flexibility and control. Right? Control comes from your structure, from the hierarchy. Right? So we have somebody in charge and subordinates and so on. So there's control there. But we also need flexibility so the organization can change, but do it in a controllable way. Right? And what we see here is we see over here, this is a very young organization over here on this side. This is older organization. Okay? So the young organization has little control, little self-control, right? You think of a startup, they can't control much of anything. Okay? But they have a lot of flexibility. And as the company grows, gets more employees, makes more money, gets more customers and things like that, the flexibility starts to decrease. But the control increases as they put in place systems and processes. And at some point, we get too much controls and we lose our flexibility. Governments do this very quickly. Right? Government agencies, organizations tend to do this pretty quickly for whatever reason. Right? But what we're looking for is this place where we have a balance between control and flexibility. That's an area called prime. And so that's what we're working to get companies to, is to get them to prime and then help them to stay in prime. Right? And we get them here from prime, we get them over here that have already passed prime. I mean, Nokia is a great example. It was in prime for a while, and then what happened? Who knows, right? They went this way. And they don't exist in the same form anymore. But some of these companies we work with to rejuvenate them, to get them back into prime, so to rebuild the flexibility in them. Right? And we'll talk a little bit about structural issues and how we do that as we go on. So, and this is a picture of our life cycle. For those of you that don't know Adizes, we use this life cycle. It starts down here in courtship, which is actually, courtship is a phase between a man and a woman before they're married, but they've decided to get married. Right? They're courting. So they're in love, and you know, they think the world of each other, and the guy thinks the woman's perfect, and they're going to get married and live happily ever after. Right? And that's the stage in a company before there actually is a formal company. It's a founder with an idea. He's fallen in love with his idea or her idea. Right? And so there's certain issues that happen there and certain things that have to happen for the company to actually get founded and move forward. And then we move into infancy, which is a startup company. Right? Same as an infant child. It's very vulnerable, needs a lot of attention, can die. In the words of a company or a startup company, can disappear very quickly, right? A crisis, any problem can turn into a crisis very quickly, and so on. And once it moves out of that startup phase, it moves into what's called go-go, which is the growth phase. Right? This is where most Latvian companies are over on this side, right? A lot of startups here, a lot of companies in go-go run by the founder. They can be run that way for many, many years. You've got lots of companies here that have been run by founders for 20 or more years. They can fall into the founder's trap. I'm working with a company right now, 350 employees, close to 70 million euros in revenues, and it's all run by one person, right? The founder. And he's really getting tired of it. And he doesn't know how to get out of it. He doesn't know how to get out of it. So he's stuck in the founder's trap and has been there. Right? And then adolescence is a transition period from that founder-run company to a professionally managed company, where the founder maybe is still in the company doing some support business. Maybe they're CEO, but they're not running day-to-day operations. They have a management team that does that. And that transition is very, very difficult. Right? How does the founder let go of the company that he built or she built and give it to somebody else? Give it to their management team, who they know can't run the company. Right? So that's another story. So how do they make that transition? Once they do that and get into professional management, they move into this place called prime. There's a couple of other things over here. What tends to happen in this, as this company's growing, and they're trying to make this transition, is a founder hires a manager, doesn't work out, fires them, hires another manager, doesn't work out, fires them, and you get the unfulfilled entrepreneur. Sometimes, and this has happened in Latvia, the founder gets investment down here somewhere. They get investment. The investors make them build a board of directors. The board of directors realizes they need more control in the organization. They hire a professional manager. There's conflict between the professional manager and the board decides to fire the founder. Just happened at Uber, right? The founder got thrown out. Okay, and many other stories like that. And then the company starts to age. Right? It starts to become an old company over here, and it hasn't gone through prime yet. Right? Why does a company age? What is it that the company loses that makes it an old company? The entrepreneurial spirit. Right? When they fire that founder, that's what they lose. They lose the person who had the vision and the energy and the drive to build something new. And they replace it with somebody who has an MBA and is really good at systems and processes. Right? And they just professionalize the company and put in place more and more systems and processes, and it's lost its entrepreneurial spirit, and it's being replaced with that. Okay? And so it drops into this premature aging. And then the innovation spirit has left the company. Right? And so they really lose their ability to innovate. Okay? And then this over here is as I said, we get too much control in companies, which is too much administration, too many processes, too many systems, and what does that do to innovation? It kills it, right? And so you get companies that lose their ability to innovate. They're really big, they're really rich, but they don't have the innovation spirit in them because it's been replaced with all systems and processes, control. So we need that balance between control and flexibility. Too much control and you start to age. Too much flexibility and it's chaotic. Right. All right. So on this path through developing a company and on building a healthy company, there's 4 elements that a healthy company has. 4 things it has to achieve that the management has to make sure the company can achieve. Okay? And the first one is that it has to provide value. Right? You have to sell something that somebody wants, somebody's willing to pay for. So this gives you effectiveness in the short run. So today, this week, next month, we have a product, we can sell it, people like it, they'll pay us for it, we've got revenues coming in. Okay? Of course we have to have that in a company. Right? So, and this is all about producing the needed results. And all of us do this every day. This is a P role in the company. Okay? Providing value, this is the P role. It's a P vitamin. And we all carry this out every day. You go to work and you produce needed results for somebody. Everybody in here has a client. Maybe it's not an external client, but it's an internal client. Who you produce value for. Your boss, other departments, and so on. Right? And we do that day after day after day. And if you can't do that, they're not going to keep you around for very long. Right? If the company doesn't do that, the clients don't keep the company around. Right? So that's one of the roles that has to be fulfilled. Then, of course, we have to have efficiency. Because, you know, just giving customers what they want, you can go broke pretty quickly. Right? The best value is if you give it to them for free, from their point of view, right? In the short term. In the long term, it's probably not good for them because they lose support and all of those things if you go out of business. So we have to have some administration. We have to have systems and processes. We have to be well organized and so on. And this is the A role in the organization. Right? So we have management has to make sure the organization can produce value on an ongoing basis and can do it efficiently through administration. So we have P role and A role. Right? Now this only works in the short term. And why? What's the magic word? Why does it only work in the short term?
Because there's innovation.
Because of change.
Change.
Right? We can provide for client needs today, but those client needs are going to be different a year from now, or 2 years from now. And they're different for whatever reason, because the competition's come out with something better, because laws change, because whatever, right? Lots of things change, technologies change, and so on. And so in the long term, we have to be able to satisfy changing client needs, right? And that's this E role, that's entrepreneurship. And really what that means is having a long-term view of the market and the industry you're in, being able to imagine how it's going to change, and then take a risk and start to move in that direction. Right? And you know, we do this all the time in different areas. If you think about in sports, a tennis player, they hit the ball, and then they imagine where the next shot's going to come back, and they start to move there. They take a risk and move there. Sometimes they're wrong, and the ball goes somewhere else. The same thing in football with a goalie when there's a penalty kick. Right? He's got to guess which way the ball's going to go and take a risk and move there. Most of the time he's wrong. Right? So, but that's what entrepreneurship is. That's really in this E role, is imagining where the market's going to go and start to move there. But it means taking risk. Right? And the administration side of the organization doesn't like that. They don't like to take risks. We got everything working. You know, we got our systems in place, our processes in place. Let's just keep following those because they're working. Why do we need to take risk and change something? Okay? So there's conflict between short-term, long-term, between these different roles. So this is the E role in the organization. This is what drives innovation and change in the organization. This is what management has to be able to do. Then the last role is about efficiency in the long term. Where does that come from? How do you build efficiency in the long term? Right? If you think about this, this is all about change. And when we drive change in an organization, how do people react? You know, some like it, some don't. And some can want to go this way, some want to go that way, and they're all pulling in different directions. Right? And that's inefficient. Efficiency is if they're all changing together, pulling in the same direction. Right? So integration is the fourth thing that management has to do. How do we integrate everybody so they're moving in the same direction all the time? Maybe it's the hardest one of all, right? Is to do that. But it's also one of, maybe the most important one, is integrating people. So it's about cooperation, collaboration, building an organic organization, which means that it can change and adapt and change together. It's like a human body. As you grow and develop, everything changes together. And companies should be the same way. As they grow, everything changes together. But it doesn't happen. Right? First thing to grow is marketing, or sales, marketing. When do you get HR? A few years later, when you get 150 people or 200 people, or and so that they don't develop together, and that means that they have they're actually in different stages of that life cycle. So a company is someplace on the life cycle, but also different units of the organization have different places on the life cycle. And so that causes disintegration. And so management's job is how do we keep it all together? Another way to think about this is if you think about physics, right? We know from physics that energy is always dissipating. Right? It doesn't stay together, it always dissipates. That's why your coffee gets cold. Right? Because the energy dissipates. It's the same in organizations. The energy is always dissipating. And integration is how do we keep the energy together? How do we keep it focused? And that's the job of management. And that's really what leadership is. Right? How do we keep it all together? All right? So, so the E and the I are what we need for long-term sustainability. E we need for innovation, and I we need so that we innovate and keep everybody together pulling in the same direction. Okay? And if you have those four roles working well, you have a healthy organization. Okay? So some examples of innovation, right? Some simple examples. Okay? And that's maybe not the best one, but all right. This will check the temperature of your beer before you open it, I guess. Right. Of course, some of this is just marketing, right? But that's innovation as well. Okay. All right. So here we've got a picture of the organizational structure, right? At the top, we usually have, the top builds a strategy, decides on direction, and all of those things, right? And we have a layer of middle management whose job is to take what the top decides and get it implemented in the organization. And so these middle managers, right, they get orders from the top, and then they have to implement it going down. Now, in today's company, what we want is more change. So what do we tell the middle managers? We tell them, well, we also want to hear from these people. So, you know, collect some ideas from these people and bring them back up to the top. And the problem is it doesn't work. Why? Because they got crap coming down this way, and now they got crap coming up the other way, and it gets stuck in the middle. And so nothing happens with it, right? They're not structured. The structure doesn't work that way. You know, the organizational structure, we hear a lot about structure today. Anybody know what holacracy is? Heard of that? This is one where they actually throw out the structure. They say the structure is the problem. Let's just get rid of structure. We won't have any structure. You know, you got self-managed teams and on and on and on. Okay? That the big problem is structure. But, and that's why we can't innovate and change. But if you throw out the structure, what do you lose?
Control.
You lose control, right? And control we need, why do we need control? Because we have to implement. Right? We have to have control over implementation. We have to make sure things are getting done. And, you know, if you follow the behavioralists today, they're saying the structuralists are all wrong, and we just need to focus on behavioral patterns and how do we keep employees happy and how do we motivate them to innovate. And part of the problem is structure. So let's get rid of the structure. But the structure really provides, this hierarchical structure provides a very important, it's a very important tool for implementing different things. And it's been developed over, you know, hundreds of years, this structure. But it was never designed for change. It was always designed for control. And, you know, maybe a couple hundred years ago, you didn't need to change like we do today. So it worked fine. And you had a workforce that wasn't very educated. You had managers that were educated. And so, you know, the top could decide and get the others to do, and it worked okay. Right? It worked fine. But today, what do we have? Completely different environment. We have the workforce is highly educated, maybe sometimes more educated than the management. They have lots of ideas how to change things. They want to change things, but it gets stuck in here. It gets stuck in this hierarchy. And so we have to figure out how to deal with that. How do we get the change happening down here? Because The A, right, in the system, we always, when we put A in the system and it works, it builds efficiency. And then what happens? When you get more efficient, what do you get more of? What everybody wants. Profits. Right? More efficiency means more profits. Right? You can even have flat sales, but as the efficiency builds, the profits are going up. Right? So everybody likes that. And so, it's working. We're putting in place these systems and processes. Let's keep focused on that and keep building more efficiency, which means more systems and processes. Right? And so this tends to grow and grow and grow. And when it becomes too bureaucratic, what happens to the people who are innovative and creative and want to do things? They leave. Right? And you're left with, so A accumulates, E comes, and then they leave. If they don't have enough freedom, if they can't change things. So people that have that E vitamin that motivates them. Right? We've got those 4 roles, and all of us have strengths and weaknesses in those 4 roles. Some of us are good in the P role, which means we're really good at getting things done, and producing results for our clients, internal, external clients. Some of us have a strength in organizing things, in analytical strengths. Can take a bunch of data and organize it and make sense out of it, right? Which is really important for companies. Others have the strength in that E role, which is they're the visionaries. They can look at a market, look out the window and see 15 different ways to make money. Right? They just always have ideas about how to change things and do things differently. And then some of us are strong in that I role in that we're really good at working with people. Okay? And in our structures, what tends to happen is the people strong in the A role, when you start building this, they like it. And they really like it, and they push for more and more and more. And as we see we're getting more profits, management starts to follow that. And not only that, the investors like it. Right? So there's pressure on the investors to constantly build more profits, be more efficient. Okay? And so the E's get frustrated and leave. And now you've lost your ability to innovate. Right? You're in a lot of that. Okay? And so you get these E's down here, they get frustrated and they leave. Okay? So this is what A is all about. This is what we build in the organization. Can build lines of communication, coordination, planning, how to motivate people, right? Lots and lots of different things. And the E's just get squeezed out. Down here we have the P's that are actually doing things, doing the work. We got these guys doing all the planning and these guys setting direction. Okay? And so E gets squeezed out of the organization. And it's a structural problem. So in the sense of getting rid of the structure, these people are saying the structure is the problem. In one sense, they're right. And structures, this traditional structure was never designed for change. So we need something else. But we don't want to get rid of it because it's really good for what it does do, which is control. It's really good for that. Building efficiency, making sure things get done. So what we see then over this life cycle is what happens with the entrepreneurship role. Okay? In very young stages of courtship and infancy, what we see is that the entrepreneurship is very high. And as the company grows through go-go and in adolescence, it starts to drop. And when we get to prime, it comes up again. All right? Because we built flexibility in, and we also have control. But if we slip past prime, the entrepreneurship disappears. Right? The innovation, the ability to innovate. Okay. All right. As I said, this transition right here is very difficult to make, and I know that there's some people in the audience that are struggling with this. Right? And normal problems here. You've got to understand that as you're going through adolescence, an adolescent is what? It's a teenager. Right? In English, that's another word for adolescent is teenager. And what is the big struggle with teenagers? Too much? Too much affairs. They want more freedom, right? But they don't want to take any responsibility. Right? Same thing happens in companies. Your managers want to make decisions, but they don't want to be held accountable for the results. Right? And it's the same thing. So it's a teenage company. It's going through those teenage years. And what's normal is more conflict. Right? That's normal. It's a normal part of this transition. The conflict's going to go up. And when the conflict goes up, what happens to productivity? It can flatten out, right? Your productivity can start. What happens to innovation? Right? It can also drop because of the conflict that exists. Okay? It's a normal part of development. Okay. So, there's a couple other things about aging and losing. So, aging really is a function of losing the entrepreneurial spirit. Right? What does that mean in a person? Right? When is a person old? Physically they get old, but what about intellectually, emotionally? When do they get old? What keeps...
With the knowledge they have and
okay.
Okay with the stage they are.
Where they're happy with where they are. Maybe ask it this way: what keeps them young? What keeps an 80-year-old person young?
Communication with the young people, with information about the new ideas.
Okay, but listening to young people, not just telling them how everything is. Right? Listening to them. It's curiosity. Right? Curiosity keeps them young. Right? They want to continuously learn new things. They want to try skydiving when they're 80 years old. I don't know. But that's what keeps them young, is that innovative spirit. The spirit to continuously learn, to do things differently, to see the world in a different way. Right? Okay. And when you lose that, you start to age. In a company, we have this aging as a function of desired over expected. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Think about results. Desired results divided by expected results. Right? Maybe you could change expected and put in place for that forecasted. Forecasted results. Wonder if what you want is less than your forecasts. I want to make $500,000 in my company and we're forecast to make $1 million. How innovative are you going to be? How hard are you going to push to do new things? You're already making more money than you thought you should. Okay? So when our desired, when what we want is below what we're getting, we start to lose the entrepreneurial spirit. Right? If we're forecasted to make $1 million and we want $1.5 million, we want $2 million, right? Then we have some drive to push us, to keep us going. How can we get more? How can we get more? Okay? And that keeps us young. When we have goals that we haven't achieved. And really, this is tied up in the mental age of people who make strategic decisions. The mental age. Right? That if what they want in life, if they've already gotten more than what they want, they lose the drive to continue to get more. And that's the entrepreneurial spirit. That's the E in the organization. That's where innovation comes from. Okay? Another thing is your relative market share. Right? If you're number one in the market, what drive is there to keep pushing you? Where do you go from there? Down. That's where you go, is down. So, however, but what about your market share? Is your market share just the truth of your company? Or what is it? Does the market share really define your company? Or is it just one way of measuring your company? And you can measure your company in any way you want. Right? We're number one in printing books, right? So we're number one in the market. but we could redefine our market a different way. Maybe, I don't know, brochures or whatever, right? We could change we're number one in this, but now we're going to focus on something else, because there we're only number 5 or 6. So you can change how you perceive your market share. So that if you're number 1 somewhere, just change it and say, you guys, yeah, that's great, but we're not focused on that now. We're going to keep that, but we need to build up the other part of the business as well. We need to focus on something else. So relative market share perceived by the management. Okay? Because when you're number 1, it's too easy to relax. All right. Functionality of leadership. Okay. And basically this means how flexible is the leadership in being able to fulfill those different P, A, E, and I roles, right? Are they fulfilling all 4 of them? Or are they just focusing on A? Or are they focusing too much on E? Or whatever it is, okay? So it has to be balanced, right? And then this organizational structure, which is what we're here to talk about today, all right? So here's a simple structure, okay? We got a company, it's got sales and marketing, research and production, strategic planning, finance and control. So let me ask it this way. Let's talk about sales, okay? We've got 4 roles. The P role, producing value. The A role is administration, E is entrepreneurship, I is integration. If you think about sales, which of those 4 roles do they primarily fulfill? P role, right? They build client value. They take care of clients. Okay? Of course, they have to do the A role. They have to do reporting and then analyze their results. They have to have the E role in that they're creative in how they approach customers and all of that. And the I role is they have to work together, right? But primarily it's a P function, providing for client value. Now what about marketing? P, A, E, or I? What does marketing do? What should be the role of marketing? Come on, you all work in companies, you all have marketing departments.
It can be a P and an E at the same time.
It could be,
Because
right?
they have to deliver results on one hand.
Sure.
But they need to be innovative in the way how they place the products, which also is sort of an innovation.
Right. But what else does marketing do? What do you really want from your marketing department?
Look where the market can go and position the company.
Why do they do market research? Because they're trying to understand how the market's changing, how our customer needs changing. Right? What's coming in a year from now, 2 years from now? Right? That's the E role. And that's really what you'd like, you know, they do advertising as well and things like that, which is P role, perhaps, but the E role is forecasting the future. Right? And now, if you put them together, which happens in a lot of companies, you have sales and marketing together. Right? Sales is short-term oriented, marketing is long-term oriented. What happens?
Short term is more pressing, so.
It becomes short, the short term kills the long term. And what really happens is marketing starts to become sales support. They print sales materials, analyze salesmen's results, but that's not real marketing. They place ads and things like that, but they're not really doing it in real marketing. Real marketing, they don't have time to do it. Right? They do it in their spare time. And that's why it's called sales and marketing, because when they're together, sales is more important than marketing. Right? You don't see it called marketing and sales. So it's short-term oriented. The same thing, you put research and development and production together. And research and development becomes like doing maintenance for production. Just maintaining the machinery, finding little ways to get it to produce, build more efficiency. Right? But they're not really looking for new ways to produce and bringing in new technologies and things like that, because the short term will kill the long term. Right? And over here we have finance and accounting, which is short-term oriented. Finance should be looking more long-term. What do we do with our money, you know, in the long term, so that we maintain good cash flow, so that we maintain, I just forgot the word, that we always have money. Liquidity, Thank you. How do we invest for the future and things like that, right? It should be long-term oriented. HR development is long-term oriented. Right? How do we grow and develop our people for the future? Right? And if you put them together, it becomes just an HR administration. And so the whole company then, you've got one spot right here. Maybe you have a department on strategic planning. Maybe not. Okay, but you've got one department and against all of this, and the company really becomes short-term oriented. It's all about running day-to-day operations, and change becomes very difficult because there's no engine there to really change the company. Right? If anybody wants to challenge us at any time, speak up, because we can have a conversation. You don't just have to listen to me. So any questions also? All right. So one of the things we try to do is to split them, right? Here we've got production, our sales, and marketing are split. Okay? We have under operations director, we have sales. Over here, maybe we have a vice president of development. Okay? If we need a person here. And under that person, we have research and development, marketing, finance, human resource development. Those are all E functions. Right? In the previous slide, the E function was just in one department under strategic planning. Here we've got a whole section of the organization focused on developing for the future. Right? And then we've got in administration, we've got accounting, personnel, which is HR administration, much more short-term oriented, sales and production also. And so we have our A here, administration in the organization, and we have our P producing results in the organization. Right? And then where is I? I's missing from the picture. The integration role. It's up here, and that's the role of the general manager. Keep it all together. Because between these different roles, there's a lot of conflict. Right? But now you've got E separated out so that they can actually change the organization. They can push it in new directions. Or at least there's a possibility, greater possibility for that now. All right? Who should be the new general manager? Somebody from over here, right? Because they're creating the future. Right? They're creating the future, one of the leaders here. Maybe if you have a vice president here, he becomes the new general manager. Right? He's creating a future, now he can live with it. Right? And who comes over here? One of these guys. And so we try to move them across the organization before we move people up, so that they see it from different points of view. See it, experience the organization from the A role, experience it from the P role, experience it from the E role. So that by the time they get up here, they've seen it from all these different angles, developed their styles and their strengths in those different styles. All right. So how not to get old. So that's one thing, right? Is that structure that way. We're going to look at more issues of structure though. Okay? Really, another key issue is that we decentralize the E role. As I said, in companies that are run by a founder, and it doesn't even have to be a founder, it can just be a CEO who basically has centralized a lot of decision making in him or herself. Right? But E is all up here. You can have a vice president for sales, a vice president for production, a vice president of administration, right? But when there's a founder in the company, you have a vice president of sales and marketing. But who makes all the decisions about new markets to go into? Who makes them?
GM.
Yeah, the founder, the general manager, right? Who makes the decisions about new production technologies? New products. The founder.
Final approval, yeah.
Yeah, it's all centralized up here. All the new things going on in the organization. New investments. new development, all of that is centralized up here. Right? And really, what happens then if that person leaves the organization is you've lost the E. Right? The E is all centralized. You lost the E, and now this organization is going to struggle. And that's what happens when a founder gets kicked out of the company. I mean, Apple is the biggest example, right? Most popular, famous example probably, is that they lost Steve Jobs, which was their entrepreneurial spirit, and then they struggled and struggled and struggled because they didn't have that in the organization anymore. And so what we work on doing is how do you decentralize that? So if you lose the top person, you still have the E in the organization. Right? You can still have innovation taking place. Okay? And what we're trying to do, okay, so here's our structure again. Right? As we said, this structure is really good for top-down management. PA control. Command and control. Okay? It works well for that. I mean, if anybody disagrees, you can, but you know, that's really what it's good at. You think about the military or you know, any other thing that's highly structured, some dictatorships, right? They're really good at implementation. They may implement horrible decisions, but they're really good at doing it. Right? And then over here, what we're trying to do is build flexibility in the organization, where we work on the E and the I. The E is the innovation, the I is the collaboration, and we want to do that bottom up, right? Which is what everybody says. How do we get more ideas from the bottom? How do we get more people involved in, how do we engage employees? That's what everybody's looking for. Okay? And so that's what we have is a methodology for how to do that. That's what Adizes is. It's a methodology for how to do that. All right? And a lot of how we do it is through structure. Okay? Now you can see different structures around. This is a nice one. Somebody just drew it sometime and said, this is our structure, and during a meeting. Right? Here's another one somebody drew. Here's the company, and this person just wanted to say that everybody's responsible for the company, and the CEO of the company was sitting there with his second in command, and the question was, well, where's the second in command? And he said, oh, I forgot him, and so he just drew another circle. Right? So some interesting structures. Here's, if you think about a group of companies, the way that it should be, that we like it to be, is that we have a range of companies in different stages of the life cycle. Right? And we call it an organizational family, because that's really what it's like. We've got grandparents, we've got infants, we've got kids, we've got teenagers, and we've got parents. Right? And that's a strong family when you have that. And each is fulfilling a role, and can fill that role and do it well. Here's where most of the wisdom is, but they don't control things. Right? The parents control things. The parent company. This could be the parent company, but the company in prime is the one that has the control. Right? Really. Okay. This gives us our flexibility. And then this gives us our wisdom and knowledge, which is like one of the problems that happens in big companies when they start small companies, right? You might have a big company, an aristocratic company, which has moved past prime and is starting to age. They're losing their ability to innovate. So they start a new company, and this happens all the time in Latvia as well, right? Big company starts an office here, and they put in place all kinds of what? Reporting procedures, bureaucracy, and then all the employees complain, we can't get anything done because corporate headquarters needs all this. And we call that organizational colonialism. They go and colonize their new startups, and they're just trying to help, right? They're trying to get control and trying to give you the way to do things, but it actually gets in the way. Right? You know, if you're a parent and you want your kids to learn something, you let them experience failure, right? That's really important. And too many parent companies don't want their startups or their younger companies to experience failure.
It costs.
It's expensive, right? But in the long run, it's more expensive that they don't experience it. Because what do you learn from? You learn from mistakes, right? That's where you learn the most. So these young companies have to be free to make mistakes. That's the only way they'll learn. I mean, one of the big reasons that startups fail is because they have too much money. Right? And what does that mean? How can you fail having too much money?
Demotivate.
It could demotivate. But when you have a problem, then what do?
Throw money at it.
You just throw money after it. You hire a consultant to come in and figure it out. If you don't have the money, what do? You struggle with it and figure it out. And then you actually learn something. When you just buy a solution, you don't learn anything. You know, a little bit, you know, but you don't struggle with it and it doesn't become part of your like company knowledge. Right? So having too much money, you know, if corporate headquarters doesn't give you more money and more money and more money, maybe that's a good thing. You should figure out how to solve the problem on your own. And parents, you know, you do this as parents all the time with your kids. You don't solve all their problems for them. Right? You got to let them experience, struggle with a problem and figure it out, and then they actually really learn. Right? Okay. So we'll start talking about structure. Maybe actually now's a good time to take a break. We'll take a break for 15 minutes, and then we come back and we'll have about 15 minutes left to go through the actual structure. All right? Good. So now we're going to get into this, something more specific about the structural component of what we do, okay? But first, a word about how we get to here. Because when we put in place the structure, it's one part of an organizational program that we do at the company. When we put in place a structure, we're going to be asking a lot more from different people in the company. Different types of performance, different behaviors, things like that. It's a different way of working. We're asking them to have a different view of the company. One of the things we're doing is, in a lot of companies, you have 1 or 2 people that are responsible for the profit of the company, and they lose 3 or 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. And what we want to do is delegate that, so we've got 10 or 15 people that are all losing an hour's sleep a night each. Right? So to take some of the weight off of the okay. And to get the company ready for that, we go through a series of steps. Right? So when we engage with a company in a program, there's actually 11 different phases. And structure, the beginning of structure is phase 5. The full structure is phases 5 and 6. The first few phases, we'll talk about in a few minutes, are getting the company ready for a new structure. Okay? So we'll go over a little bit about how this structure works, though. Right? So, as I said, one of the ideas that's popular today is to throw out the structure. We certainly don't do that. Right? We want to keep the structure, but we redefine the structure. We do it differently. Right? Our structure is based on different units, of course, and it's built around the intent of each different unit. Right? Some units are primarily responsible for the P role, some for the A role, some for the E role. Okay? So the intent of the organization depends on, that determines how we structure it, the intent of different units, different centers. It's color-coded. We've got different colors for different parts of the organization. Green, yellow, red, blue, so on, right? We do budgeting, of course, in a very specific way, which I'll share a little bit about. We have key performance indicators, of course, and rules. We build boundaries. We build fences, because strong fences make good neighbors. Right? So certainly, we've got, we go into this company we're working with now, and they've got product managers, department of product managers, department of sales guys, and another department in, but anyway, they've got their sales guys who are responsible for sales, but their project managers are also doing sales, the way it's structured right now, right? Which they shouldn't be, but they are. Right? And so we need to break down the responsibilities, who's responsible for what, and we do that, all right? So some of the colors we have profit centers, okay? So we organize around different profit centers. And they are a green color. You'll see in the structure in a little bit. Profit center is green, and it means that it's responsible for revenue, bringing in external revenue, but they're also fully responsible for their profit and loss. So a sales department is responsible. They get a budget, and they can spend that budget on marketing, whatever support they need. We basically build up a lot of small companies inside a big company. We build up an internal marketplace. Right? And so we have green units, which are profit centers. We have blue units. We may have blue units, which are internal profit centers. So they're selling to maybe green units, and they're selling at a reduced price, right? A discounted market price. We have centers of excellence, which are red. And basically these are cost centers, but nobody wants to be a cost center, so we call them a center of excellence, right? And these are support services, right? Accounting would be an excellence center, center of excellence. They provide support to the greens, right? So we structure around the green units, and the green units then get support from red units. I'll give you an example in a few minutes.
Where is the finances? With the excellence center or in different?
Finance is probably an excellence center. right? Okay, service center then. So a service center, the difference between a red excellence center and a service center is that with a service center, you can break down the service they're providing for the green units to a per unit price, right? So warehousing, you could break down the warehousing provides service to a green unit, right? A green unit is selling tires to somebody. They keep their tires in a warehouse. The warehouse can charge them for the space that they use in the warehouse. Okay, so they're a service center, they're a yellow service center, and they use a transfer price, which is at cost. So in theory, a service center should break even. Okay, they have incomes, they have expenses. All right? So I'll give you an example. This is a company in Denmark. And this guy creates all of these, he's an innovative guy, he creates all these products and then sells them all over the place, all over the EU and different parts of the world, right? So here's the owner, right? He's got full profit and loss responsibility over his company. So what color is he? He's green, right? Now he's got, the products he makes though are designed in Italy by another company in Italy. Okay, so he comes up with a prototype, ships it off to Italy where they come up with a nice design, maybe for the packaging and also what it's going to look like when customers get it and so on. Right? The production takes place in China. Right? So they design it, it goes to China where they produce it. Logistics happens through Germany, a German company. Right? Sales, he's got sales that takes place, he's got representatives in USA, distributors in USA and EU. Then in Denmark, he has his accounting, and he also has his legal advice. Okay? So as we said, this owner is the green unit. What about the others? What about the design company, and how would you color code that? Design company in Italy. The production in China. There's only one profit. So those are either yellow, right? Yellow. They're providing support. You might say it's blue. They're maybe doing it at a reduced cost or whatever, because they're making profit as well. Yellows don't make profit. So maybe it's like an internal profit center. Now, they're not internal to his company. Right? This is managerial structure. It's not legal structure. Okay? Those are two different things. We're looking right now at a managerial structure. So they're providing support for this green unit. These guys are providing support for the green unit. They're also providing support for the green unit. And they're yellow or blue because you can get a per unit cost on them. Right? For every unit, for every product he makes, they can charge him. Right? Per product. They can charge him per piece they make. They can charge for per piece they transport. So they can get a per piece price. Right? What about accounting? You can't, I mean, you could get a per piece price for accounting, but it's not really worth it. You don't need it. Right? It probably costs more to do that than it's worth. Right? So that's a red unit. Okay? And generally, when you have multiple green units in companies, you want multiple green units. And the red units, the way the red units work is, well, first of all, you have multiple green units. The yellows provide support to the green units and charge them for that. Right? The red units are shared among the greens because you can't break it down to a per unit price. Okay? If you can break it down to a per unit price and that's feasible to do that, then you make it a yellow unit. If it's a shared expense, marketing might be shared. Right? Accounting is shared. Maybe transport is shared. But you could break that down also easily to a per unit piece. Right? Then it becomes red. Okay? All right? So again, this is a managerial structure. And it allows him to track easily where all the money's going. Okay? This really simple example. Now, what would happen if he brought all of this inside? Wonder if he says, okay, you know, instead of outsourcing design to Italy, I'm gonna do it in-house. And I can create my own production and transport also, right? This is what tends to happen. He's green and everything else is red. He's the only one responsible for profit and loss. He's also got to take care of all of this, make all of these decisions, their support, but it's just one big red unit. Okay? And this happens in companies all the time. And now the one losing sleep is this guy. Okay? In this previous structure, they're also losing sleep over how their business goes. Okay? Because they're responsible as well. In this one, all the responsibility is here. So I show you this because maybe it's easier to see when you talk about a company that's outsourcing different services. That's a managerial structure. Doesn't have anything to do with legal structures. All right? All right, here's a case, company that we're working with. This case is, this company is in go-go, kind of moving into adolescence, right? So go-go is fast growth company, 350 employees, 60 to 70 million euros in sales, operating across the Baltics, wholesale distribution in the automotive industry, single owner, stuck in the founder's trap, not enough entrepreneurship is one thing, but not enough accountability in the company. Right? Like today we had a meeting in which, you know, people, they're off targets, they had some profit targets, they're below those targets, and even the people on the senior management team, they don't take responsibility for it. Right? They say it's somebody's fault there, or it's somebody's fault there, it's somebody's fault there, but they don't take responsibility. And you can't really hold them accountable. It's hard. Okay? But so this is what the company basically looks like when we start with it. Right? Here's Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, support services, operations. These are sales units, CEO, and that's what it looks like, right? One person responsible for all of this, making all of the big decisions, okay? So we've been working with them now since August, and we've gone through several steps to get to the point where last month we did this structure, okay? And the structure we came up with now looks like this. Okay? So what we've got is a series of green units. So we've got, they're selling to end users. They're selling to resellers. And so we've got guys that are ahead of those departments. We've got a head of operations. We've got product managers over here. So we have all of these green units, right? And they're fully responsible for profit and loss of their unit. Which means what? Which means they have a budget. Which means they have their inflows, they have their outflows, right? Which gives what's ever left is their net contribution. And then after that, they subtract shared costs. So we have to figure out how to split the costs. And then what's left over is a contribution to shareholders. And so we've got all of these that have they've created their revenue goals. They've created their expense, and they all get a budget, right? And typically in a company, where does the training budget go? Who gets the training budget? HR, they get a training budget, right? And so you call up HR, say, I need training, they have money, okay, we'll create that training. Here, these guys have a training budget. The Greens have training budget, if they need it, right? And if they need training, they buy it from HR. They order it from HR. They have a marketing budget. If they need marketing research, they order it from marketing, okay? And that's their expenses. So now they're responsible for expenses and they're responsible for income. And now, that allows a few different things. Actually, when it's all set up, you can actually track where every single euro goes through the company. Right? And when it's set up and you have it done right, you know, you can see, we have budgets, right? So somebody's supposed to make 500,000 euros this month, or this year, one of these greens. Or let's say in a quarter they're supposed to, or in a month they're supposed to do 50,000, I don't know, 50,000 euros. you can track that and see, we give them a deviation, maybe 5% or something, but if they're below that 5%, there's immediately a trigger, right? And the trigger happens here, because we're below budget. And then we can look and see that actually they're below budget here, and then we can look down and go to here, and we can call this person and say, what's going on? Because it's all laid out, because we have this system in place, right? And then they can say, well, our expenses were too much, or whatever it is, right? Okay? So what this does is it builds transparency in the organization. And it also starts to build accountability. Along with this, right, we break this down, they get a budget, which the first thing we do is we create objectives, right? We build this structure, then for each of the key positions here, right, we create a set of objectives. Now in sales, what are objectives usually?
So, turnover.
Revenues, right? How much are you going to sell? Is that a P, A, E, or I objective? P, right? That's how much we're going to, what we're going to get done. Okay? That's the value we're going to create, is that revenue. So you give somebody a target just on revenues to sell more and sell more and sell more. What happens in their department to change? What happens to building efficiency? So when we set targets, it's not enough just to have results-based targets. We set targets in, so if you're the head of, for instance, you're here, you're going to have P targets, which are results. You're going to have A targets, which is how are we going to build efficiency? Right? What are you going to do to increase the efficiency in your department? What kind of systems or processes are you going to build? Are you going to automate something? Right? So we have efficiency targets. Then the person also has E targets, which is what new things are you going to develop? Right? So this is about change and development. And then they have I targets, which is how are you going to develop your people? How are you going to develop yourself? Right? So this is about integration and people development. Right? Growing people. Okay? And so we have a set of targets. You know, you might have 2 or 3 targets in each one of these objectives. And so that you have a balanced approach to building your business. Basically, what we're doing here is we're working on decentralizing profit and loss. That's all we're doing, is decentralizing the profit and loss so that it's not only this person responsible, that every green is responsible for profit and loss. What else does that allow once you have that set up? It allows for profit sharing, right? Because your unit creates a profit. Actually, and if you don't share profits, that's exploitation. Because actually what you're doing is you're asking these people to all build a business. And if they're going to go through the effort to build a business, they need to share in the rewards of that. Okay? So it allows you to put in place profit sharing as well. Yes?
Does the system or the structure somehow foresee that you share best practices? Because if you have in every unit the kind of goals, of course you will have some units.
We're going to get to that, yeah. We're going to get to that. Okay. There's one big weakness here, and that's part of it. Okay, so we're going to get to that. All right. So yeah, there's another big weakness here though too, in that this is all still about driving results. There's something about change here, right? In a departmental level, perhaps. But what about change for the whole organization and growth and development, right? That's still not here, okay? And there's a reason why, okay? And it's because you look up here, right, where I just made the circle. You have the CEO, and then you have a senior management team, right? And senior management teams, you all have senior management teams. What's their focus? They usually meet once a week. The company we're working with, they're meeting twice a week, right? 3 hours or 4 hours each time. Right? And what is their focus? What are they doing in those meetings?
In too many cases, it's results and day-to-day operations.
It's managing operations.
They don't have time to really look for innovation.
When do they look at innovation and strategy? 1 day a year, 2 days a year, you have a strategic retreat and talk about strategy. Right? There's still nothing really driving organizational change here. Okay, this is great. It builds an internal marketplace. You can delegate or decentralize profit and loss. You can build a system where you're sharing these costs, and it builds more accountability. What we're doing is we're creating a set of objectives, right? Say you have to have some training, you have to do some automation, and then what we need to do is give them money to get those things done. So we set the objectives, and then we give them the resources to do it. So, and they've agreed on the objectives, they agree on the amount of money they need, and now you can really hold them accountable. And especially when you put in profit sharing. Right? Because you can say, look, you knew what to do, you agreed to do it, you got the resources to get it done, why isn't it done? Right? If one of those is missing, it's hard to hold people accountable. They can say, well, I didn't have enough money, I didn't have the right people, I didn't have this, I didn't have that, and right? But if you set all of this up to where they have the objectives, they have the resources to get it done, they're being paid to do it, now you can hold them accountable. Okay. So when we do structure, it's not just the structure of roles and responsibilities. Right? That's what that is. But it's also structure of authority, which is the money. Right? You got money, you got authority. Right? You can make decisions about what to do with it. You have authority over getting training or not. You don't have to go to anybody to get approval to get trainings. You just get a budget at the beginning of the year, you got your training budget, you decide what to do with it. Okay? And for all the other things as well. Right? But still, we struggle with how to drive change for the whole organization. Right? And it's because the senior management team is mainly focused week after week on operational issues. Who is driving change? It's not there. It happens some here, but not on a strategic level, really. To some extent, it can. But really, this is about how do I optimize my green unit? Okay? So, and so here we have the top of the organization, which is the senior management team meeting every week, operational issues. And so what we do is we create another structural unit, which comes out here. It's called, you can't read that, it's called the POC. The POC is a Participative Organizational Council. And the POC is made up of the senior management team plus some people from lower management. Okay? And they meet once a month. Right? And what do? They work on mission, vision, values. They work on structure. Right? They create this structure and then they review it every year or more often. They work on strategy, right? On a monthly basis. Right? And how do they do that? Right? So these are the members in the blue lines. These are the members. Who is on the POC? Right? So the POC actually, what the job of the POC really is to manage a system of problem solving. How do we solve the organization's problems? Right? Problems of mission and vision and strategy and those long-term things, also some short-term issues. Okay? And they do that through a group of, they create problem-solving teams. Okay? So, for instance, they can work on operational issues as well. We've got a company we're working with, an operational issue is that the transport, every busy season, the transport falls behind in deliveries. Right? They don't have the capacity. And it happens year after year after year. And they just live with it. Okay? So they need to solve this problem somehow because, you know, customers get upset and so they need to solve it. So what they do is they put together what's called a center team, problem-solving team, to deal with this issue. And who's on that team is determined by what the task is. So if we have a problem with deliveries system, there's going to be somebody from warehousing there on this team. There's going to be somebody from logistics. There's going to probably be sales guy there, right? Salesperson, sales director, whatever. So whoever is a key stakeholder in this problem. Okay? Because normally the way we do it is we go and yell at logistics. Right? Saying, what the hell? Why can't you get deliveries done? Try this, try that, just fix the problem. And we expect just the logistics guy to fix it. And in reality, though, the problem is systemic. It exists through the whole system. And if the logistics guy solves it, and solves it in such a way, his interest is in really making it work, but also in how it works for his department. Whether or not his solution works for sales, who cares, right? Logistics is my responsibility. If sales doesn't like it, they got to figure something else out. Okay? So, but what we want to do is we want to get them together to figure out the problem together. And in a normal structure, that doesn't happen. Right? When do you get somebody from sales together with somebody from finance and somebody from HR, depending on what the problem is, when do you get these people together to actually solve something? You don't. Instead, what we do is we take the problems, we give marketing problems to marketing, they prioritize which ones are important, the marketing director, and which ones are going to get solved in which order. The logistics problems go to logistics, and that makes sense. Right? But then you have all these individual managers deciding and prioritizing the problems, and there's no coordination between them. So they're pulling in different directions. And so what this does is it allows us once a month to meet and prioritize the problems and which ones are going to get solved in which order and who's going to work on it. Right? And what this gives the company is continuous learning, continuous development, continuous improvement.
How does that go together with this autonomy that you have given to the individual units? I mean, they get targets. Yeah? And
well, they're still down here. The individual units are down here.
But let's say you have this target of automation. Yeah?
Look, I'll show you. Here's the senior management team, and this is the council. Okay? These guys are all, basically they have autonomy over operations. These guys decide which problems are going to solve, and on this team is this guy, some of these people, and some of these people, right? And we can even bring in others.
I mean, look, let's say you are in charge of running one of these shops, right? And you want to automatize. And you decide to buy a certain software. And I'm running one of the other shops. And I also want to automatize. And I buy a different software. I might end up in a situation where I have a completely heterogeneous structure in terms of my IT landscape, and it somehow still needs to work together.
Yeah.
And looking at a more, let's say, holistic point of view, I don't get the integrated optimum because everyone is simply buying what he or she believes is the best thing to do.
When we develop these objectives, we're going to hear that, 2 or 3 different departments want to automate. Great, let's do that. You guys get together and figure out how to do it. Create a center team and figure, that's your target, but do it together.
Okay.
So we create a team. Right? Okay, so, that would be part of the goals here. If it's not here, you don't just automate because you want to. Right? It's part of the targets you set. It's part of your A targets. And we did it in a few different departments, so we get these departments together to figure out how to do it collaboratively, so that it works across the organization. That answer your question?
Yeah, that's a question.
Okay. And so, so now we've got this side, the senior management team, which is in charge of implementation, and we've got this organizational council, which is in charge of change and development. Right? So now we have both elements in the company, at the top of the company. Right? What does that create? creates a lot of conflict. But you can't live without conflict. And so of course it creates conflict, short-term versus long-term. Right? One department wants to automate one way, another department wants to automate a different way. But that's all taken care of in the decision-making process. Okay? Remember, this is a managerial structure. Within this structure, there's different companies. All of this isn't one company. So it doesn't have much to do with the legal structure. This is a managerial structure. Right? Okay? And part of the technology we have, the methodology, is how to manage the conflict that all of this creates. Because we have to have conflict. If we don't have conflict, nothing ever changes. Right? The company stagnates. Too much conflict, and the same thing happens. Right? So you need conflict, and how do we make it constructive? And so that's part of the methodology. All right? All right. So that's part of the way that we do this is the first thing we do with an organization when we engage with an organization to start this process is we do a diagnosis. With a diagnosis, we pull out a lot of potential improvement points. Potential improvement points, first of all, a diagnosis takes place with the top 3 layers of the company. So CEO, top management team, and then the next layer down. We bring together like up to 25 people to do a diagnosis over 2 to 3 days, depending on the size of the company, how deep they want to go. And what they do is they pull out all of what we call potential improvement points. So these are things that the company has control over that could be improved. Right? When we do it with companies, we can get 200, 250 of these PIPs. It's, it's a pretty common number. 250 potential improvement points, right?
Or
And
problems, yeah?
what'd you say?
Or problems.
Problems.
Yeah, we used to call them problems.
We call them potential improvement points because it's a problem or it's an opportunity.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So we don't just call them problems. We call them potential improvement points because the problem is always an opportunity to improve, right? If nothing else. Okay? Sorry? Sure. All right, come on. All right. And with these potential improvement points, they're prioritized. And the way and it's a lot of teamwork. They're prioritized and separated into behavioral problems. So we might get PIPs in terms of, like, some managers are jerks. I don't know, right? Or my manager is micromanages too much, right? That's a behavioral problem. Or our climate. We have an unfriendly climate. Whatever it is. Okay? So we have behavioral problems. We have structural problems. Like, we don't know who's responsible for what. We don't know who has authority over what. Things like that. Those are structural problems. We have process problems, which are like we don't do strategic planning. We don't have a mission. We don't have good information flow. We don't get enough information to make good decisions. We don't take corrective actions, right? We never evaluate a project and figure out how we could have done it better. Okay? Those things, and then there are operational problems, right? Which happen in client interface, how we interact with clients in sales and marketing. There's problems in transformation, how we take inputs and transform them into outputs, right? Which could be things like inventory turnovers are too high or too low or whatever. Transportation costs are too high, right? Those are all transformation problems. There's problems in HR. We don't have the right training. Things that we're too slow to hire people. We don't hire the right people. And then we have problems in financial factors, which is like cash flow and other things. Okay? And then we also have manifestations. Manifestations are like our employees are not happy. Our employee turnover is too high, which that's a problem in what? In the I role. Manifestations are in the P, A, E, and I roles. So we can have problems with behavior of employees and managers, right? Which is a manifestation. The reason we have unhappy employees is all the other stuff going on in the company. We don't change fast enough. The competition changes faster. They get new products out before we do. Okay, that's the E roll. Our profits are too low. That's the I roll. Our market share is dropping. That's the P roll. Right? And so again, that's a diagnostic tool, P, A, E, and I. What are the organizational problems you're facing? If you can look at those, you can diagnose your organization. What's missing in terms of P, A, E, and I. Right? So anyway, they create all of these PIPs. The PIPs go to the council, they're prioritized, and then they start creating these teams that solve the problems. Right? And that drives the change and development of the company. Okay? So it's another structural unit that we put in place. All right? And so then we have the PA implementation side, and we create the EI flexibility side. These, in larger companies, sorry, we'll go back, hold on. In larger companies, right, we do this POC and Center team at the top, but then we also are a diagnosis at the top, and we can also do diagnosis down farther in the organization. Right? And we did this at one of the big telecommunications companies here. We just took one department, we did a diagnosis in that department of the problems they have control over. Right? They came up with like 70 of them. We gave those to the POC. The POC meets every month. They put together teams to work on those issues, and they've been running that for a year now. And it just meets every month. The Center teams meet regularly every week, 2 to 3 hour meeting. Maybe it takes 3 or 4 meetings to deal with an issue, and then it's resolved. They let the POC know it's resolved, and then the POC creates another team. Right? So it's an ongoing process. Okay? And our methodology really is, and out of these Center teams, right, this is a company in Mexico, right? They just had this, one of the problems is, if you're a customer, how do you get this thing on and off? Right? You need a special wrench. You gotta go find a wrench, and it's really difficult. And one of their teams created this thing. You can use your fingers, and you gotta get the wrench in under the sink where it fits and all of that stuff. And that's an innovation. Right? Came out of a problem-solving team. Just redesign that little fixture so that you can use your fingers to tighten it and loosen it. Now they're selling those all over the US and Mexico. Right? Okay. So the way we usually, and then we have for how we solve these problems, how we run these teams. There's a whole methodology for that. Right? Problem solving methodology. Okay? Usually the way that we do it is we spend a little bit of time making decisions, and then what happens in implementation? Right? We try to implement change, something new, and it takes forever. People resist it, and so on. We spend a lot more time in the decision-making process. Bring in the right people, work through our technology. Let me ask you this, why don't people implement change? But why?
They don't feel the responsibility.
They don't feel responsibility.
It's fear and ego usually. Two things: fear from
Fear and
change
ego.
and ego. Yeah.
I mean-
Requires work and time.
Okay.
And it's not their decision to change.
It's not their decision. But, if the change is to pay them more money, that's not their decision either, but they'll take that. Right? I mean, generally, the reason they resist change is because they see the change as a threat. Right? There's conflicts of interests. If the change we're talking about, if sales says we need to better customize our products, right? For sales, that's great. So they go to production and tell them this. What does production say?
You don't know how to say it.
What the hell are you talking about? You know what that'll do to our efficiency? Right? They have different interests, and they're in conflict all the time. That's why they can't solve these problems. Sales, you know, we need to increase sales. Sales decides, okay, let's customize the products a little bit more, and then we'll just go to production and tell them to do it. And then the fight starts, and then they got to go to the boss, who just then says to production, yeah, go ahead and do it this time, or tell sales to tell the customer no, right? Or whatever it is. Right? But they don't come together and figure out, you know, that this is an issue. How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to solve it? And there's conflicts of interest all the time. And to solve that problem, one side's going to have to do what? Maybe both sides will have to compromise. Right? They'll have to give up something. Which means that actually, in reality, in the short term, there's no such thing as win-win. It's always compromise. Okay? And so we spend more time here in the decision-making so that we can uncover those conflicts of interest. I mean, a really simple tool that we use, called a QDD, stands for questions, doubts, disagreements. Right? When you're in a meeting a lot of times dealing with an issue, and we do this in problem-solving meetings, is what we're talking about, right? Not reporting meetings or something like that, but when we're struggling with a problem that we have to resolve, right? You have a meeting, you go through all the discussion, somebody brings up a solution, everybody agrees to it, you break out some tasks, and everybody says, yeah, we'll get that done. Everybody says, great, I'm ready to do this. The meeting ends, you go out in the hallway, and what happens? A lot of times it's the next meeting starts, right? Where some people get together and say, well, they didn't talk about this, and that's not going to work, and those idiots don't know what they're talking about, right? And they're supposed to be off implementing. They even said they would, and yet they're still there discussing. Right? So a simple tool that we use is that when you agree on the solution, the next thing you do is say, everybody agrees, this is a good idea, we're going to do it? Yes. Take out a piece of paper and split it into 3 parts. In the top, write down all your questions about this solution. In the middle, all your doubts, and in the bottom, all your disagreements. Right? And then you go around and collect those. Collect all the questions. What questions you have? You start here, you say, give me one question. I write it up. When you're done, pass to the right. Okay? You don't take a bunch of questions from one person. Everybody gives one question at a time, and you pass, because we want everybody involved. We want to hear everybody's questions. You're forcing people to give you questions. If somebody doesn't have one, they say pass. Right? But if every time you ask them and this person says pass, why are they there? I mean, if they're not going to be involved, then maybe they shouldn't be there. But we take all the questions. When you get those questions, those doubts and those disagreements, what you're actually uncovering are the conflicts of interest. Why production doesn't want to customize. Why sales thinks we have to customize. Right? Because those things, they don't come out in the normal meeting. They just don't talk about it. It's just like, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And then they go off and they do it kind of half-assed, and it doesn't really work. Okay? So that's one of the things we use is questions, doubts, and disagreements. You uncover those conflicts of interest and you talk about them. And it doesn't mean that you satisfy everybody's interests. You can't do that. But what it means is everybody gets to, they voice their opinions, they talk about them, they get an understanding of, why we can't do it that way this time, or why it needs to be done a different way, because they're all sharing from different perspectives, and it builds a lot better communication and teamwork. And anyway, and that's why I said it takes longer. But all of those things that you bring up in that meeting, they're going to happen anyway. But usually they come out here after you've started to implement. Why not do it up front? And get them out on the table and talk about them and resolve them in the meeting. Okay. All right? So that's something about our technology. And one of the things we use a lot is that idea of we have people write down ideas and then collect one idea from everybody and pass to the right. Give me one idea, pass to the right. Give me one idea, pass to the right. Because one of the problems we have in meetings is some people are not engaged. They just sit there and listen the whole time. They don't take part. Just force them to. Write up the question. Why might our market share be dropping? Everybody take a piece of paper, write down all your ideas. and then collect them one at a time. And now you've got everybody taking part. Okay. So that's part of our technology for running these problem-solving teams. And so when we do this with companies, we go in and actually run the teams. We run the diagnosis, and then we teach them how to do it so that we can leave and they can take over and do it themselves. Okay? And then implementation goes much faster. Okay? Sorry, I did it again. And so really back to this is we're putting in place, this is the flow of energy. Top down for implementation and bottom up for change and development, right? We're trying to close the loop so we have energy going that way through the organization, not just top down all the time. Right? And we do that, we bring the development issues outside over here because it doesn't work in the normal structure. We need another structural unit. That's what we found, is that we have another structural unit that's in charge of change and development and continuous improvement. Did I answer your question at all?
Well, kind of. It's only about like, fixing the problem once it appeared already, right? It's not really about the foreseeing the upcoming problems. And how
That's phase 4. We're in phase 1 right now. That comes later. Okay? Actually, we talked about phases 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1 is a diagnosis, phase 2 is running these problem-solving teams, and phase 3 is putting in place this council. Phase 4 is when you start to look into what's going on in the environment, what are the opportunities and threats out there, and what are we going to do about it. Right. Okay. That's what I have. Questions? We're right at 5 o'clock, so I took all your time for questions, but if you have 1 or 2 questions,
Is there a
yes.
way to measure this prime point somehow? Where is it?
How
Control
do you-
and
yeah.
flexibility.
There's a test online, right?
There's a test. Well, yeah, you can go online and actually there's a test that for a life cycle. Will tell you what stage your company is based on a series of questions you ask. But Prime is a place where if you're setting targets and you're achieving them, and it's then you know you're doing a good job.
It's more like a feeling rather than
It's
a measurable point, I guess.
yeah, but how do you measure it? What would you say?
Structure?
No, Prime. When are you in Prime?
You have to see about the structure. Is there a structure?
Oh, is there a structure for it? Right? I mean, it's an issue where you have professional management in place. It's not being run by one person, but you've got responsible people that are collaborating, making decisions together as a team, and then producing the results the company needs.
Show me a structure, I can tell you, are you in prime or not?
Other questions? Or comments? So everything's clear?
Not really. It seems. I love to do.
Yeah.
I have a situation question. Situation is that there is the main partner 5P000.
Lone Ranger.
There are 3 departments depending on the main guy, and I'm in one of these departments. And as there is a situation, then your employers are educated people. They don't see the strategy in the whole system, and they are developing the strategy inside the department and actually working on the motivation of the team. The risk is that the managing partner feels in danger because he is losing control. He don't have the strategy, but this department shows the strategy. And actually, he, at some situations, feeling that he's losing the control.
Uh-huh.
And
He feels threatened.
yes, but in in the long term, department loses the motivation to keep like pushing just because of their personal motivation.
And you're asking me what to do about
What
it.
to do about that? Because it's not a big corporation.
It's a company run by a founder, right?
The founder that is that.
Uh,
There is managing partner now.
A managing partner.
Yes.
Okay. But he runs it the same way a founder would run it.
Yes.
Right? Just has complete control. I mean, he can do whatever he wants.
Yes. That's true.
And what you can try to do is try to influence him, but in the end, it's his company, right? He's one of the managing partners, and he can do whatever he wants. And so, if you really can't influence the situation, if he's not willing to listen, not willing to try to change things, maybe it's better off to go somewhere else. I mean, because you can't do anything. It's their company. It's like trying to tell a parent how they should raise their kids. It's like, stay out of my life. This is my kid. I'll raise him however I want. Right? If they're open-minded and willing to learn and listen and things like that, then you have a chance. But, you know, yes.
There is always founder is feeling threatened by change coming from down up. But the structural thing, when we introduce budgeting, and you know you can keep track of all your dollars inside of these green units, this is what brings the control. So,
That brings the real control. So,
if there is no this accountability and numbers inside, just something going on, then control is losing. But if you introduce this,
So what you got to do is, you know, first of all, the founder has to really understand that everybody's got the best interest of the company at heart, right? Which maybe he does, right? The managing partner. The second thing is that the managing partner knows how, in his mind, knows how the company works. And in their mind, a lot of times they're the only one that really understands the whole picture. Right? That's their thinking. I make all the decisions because nobody else really sees the big picture. Okay? And somehow, in terms of influencing them, you said they're a big P? Is
Yeah.
their role?
According to the description, he is the type P000.
A Lone Ranger. Does everything himself and
Yes.
controls everything, micromanages and,
Yes.
and takes all the tasks on himself. You bring him an idea, says, put it on my desk.
He's always stressed. If
And
you
always
don't-
stressed.
Yes.
Right?
I have maybe from another side of my question, how to improve this cooperation between departments, between groups. Yes, how I know from my experience, it's very important that from one department, one group, or one structure is some people, some men who understand the problems for another group. On another group, the same who understands this needs of higher group. In this case, they will be as translators. In opposite case, I know that if there are two departments, two groups, where nobody understands specific of another group, there is very difficult to find sometimes optimal solution. But if you have something like agent, something like spy from,
But that's what we're
this
building when we
become-
do these synod teams. That's what we're building, is we bring people from different units together that are stakeholders in whatever the issue is to solve the problem together. So they're understanding each other's perspectives and learning more about the others' departments and how this problem
If it's
affects
one
logistics.
agent, then it's necessary, no necessity too much to speak.
If it's what?
Then it's no necessity too much to discuss.
I didn't
No,
understand.
no. If, for example, two groups which there is which need to salesmen would like to sell but for this is necessary to modify product, but from production don't like to change production.
Yes,
But
one
there
second,
is
one second.
Yes.
We don't just put a group of people together and say, go at it. You guys figure it out. There's a process.
Yes,
There's a whole process.
some agent who knows problems of both groups.
I mean, each group knows their problems. You put them together, they learn about each other's problems. That's our approach. And your approach is fine too. If you have people in the organization that just helps this go along, right? If you have people that understand both parts of, different parts of the organization. Okay? But back to your question is that, I mean, what I would suggest is that the managers get together, have a meeting with this managing director and say, look, we've got some ideas about how to manage this company. And we want to see it succeed as much as you do. Can we work on some of these issues? And don't let the owner, the managing partner take it away from you, right? Because these big Ps, they will take things away and say, okay, I'll do it, I'll get to it next week. Just say, this is what we want to do. This is what we've done on this already. This is the results we expect to achieve and how we're going to get those results. And all we need is your permission to go ahead and do it. Right? But focus on the results that they're going to get, right? What's going to be improved, and how it's going to make everybody's lives better. How it's going to help customers. Okay? Something like that. Okay? All right. So,
Yeah, what is the book is going to be called? You said.
Mastering Change. What's it in Latvian?
Prasmīgi pārmaiņu vadība.
So that's the correct name?
Yeah. Can I repeat, Greg?
Sure.
Atstāšu izņu, kā atsūtu man, tad es tev atsūtīšu. Kā vārds izskatās, tāpēc redzēt. Normāli, tad vārki dizains jau gatavs.
All right, anything else? Right. So, I'm certainly, if you guys come up with other questions, you can call me, you can write to me, whatever you want to do. We've got, if you're interested in learning more, Vladimir's is going to be leading a full-day session on, not October 5th, but on May 25th. Sorry, that's last fall, May 24th. Right, and there's flyers around for that. Okay, so if you're interested in more detail in that, you can talk a lot more about life cycle and PAEI and these issues of how to work with the different styles and things like that. Okay? All right. How's everybody feel?
Great.
Fantastic, great, tired,
Enlightened.
Well.
enlightened?
Well.
Good. All right. Well, good luck. And really, if you got more questions, just call us. Call me.